Today, we're going to talk about psychological safety and how to build teams that feel psychologically safe. Now, this is a critical topic and a hot topic these days as diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations are becoming critical in every organization. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, this is the right time to subscribe to my channel and push on the notification button so that you can get access to new videos as I upload them. And now, let's get started on today's topic on how to create psychologically safe teams. Now, last month was a very busy month for me. I was busy with various speaking engagements where I got to share my thoughts around technology, around leadership, women empowerment, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. One of the highlights of last month was a keynote session that I did for People Matters, where we had over 500 leaders join across the globe to talk about how to build inclusive teams, to talk about how to embrace allyship. And during that topic, as we were talking about building inclusive teams, the topic of psychological safety came up, and people had a lot of questions around how to build psychological teams. So I thought I'll bring this topic to you, my YouTube audience, and we can talk and drill down more on psychological safety. So let's get started. Before we start, I would like to ask you a question. Do you feel comfortable sharing your thoughts, your ideas, or your concerns at work without having to worry about consequences or ripple effect? Now, if your answer is no, you're not alone. Amy Edmondson, the leadership and management professor at Harvard Business School, has actually done a lot of work around it, highlighting how psychological safety plays such a critical role in building diverse, inclusive, and effective teams. She defines psychological safety as a climate where one believes that they can speak up, they can ask questions, they can voice opinions, and they can share their ideas without having to worry about consequences or ripple effects. Psychological safety is key to driving and building healthy teams. As a leader, you can build high-performing, innovative, and inclusive team by creating a safe space for your people to speak up, to make mistakes, to bring their full self to work, and bring their diversity of thought in creating innovative solutions that resonate with your customers. So then you would ask, Rasham, if this is so important, if building psychological safety is so important, how do we as leaders go about building psychological safety within our teams? I'm going to share 5 steps with you that you can use immediately to start building psychological safety within your team. So are you ready for this? Here is tip number 1. Clarify the purpose and vision. Start with sharing the bigger picture, right? Why is your team doing the work that they are doing? Why is their work so important? What role do they play in driving the purpose, the vision of your company and your organization? Now, when you do this, you empower your team to think beyond just their day-to-day operations and bring out a point of view on innovative solutions based on their diverse experiences, based on their understanding and their interpretation of problems. And this is when you truly start building that culture of innovation within your team by including everybody and the diversity of thought in the conversation. Now, the second step is to be vulnerable. Now, if you want to normalize risk-taking and failures as learning opportunities, you need to get comfortable as a leader to start talking about your risks, your learnings, your failures, and not just about your successes. Because when the team starts seeing you sharing your learnings, sharing your vulnerabilities, they're encouraged to do so too. And they think it's okay to do that. And that is the most important thing. When you want to bring in that diversity of thought, that inclusion into the conversation, you want to think about, does my team feel safe? Are they encouraged to share their experiences, their point of view? And if you are not sharing your point of view as a leader, then that opportunity is not being presented to your team as well. Now, here is the thing. we talk about inclusion, we talk about diversity of thought from a perspective of doing the right thing. But also remember that in diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging is also a smart thing to do. And it's a smart thing to do because businesses who have started their journey on DEI and are further along can already see benefits in terms of the innovation that's happening in their teams, in terms of the solutions that they are bringing to their customers, and that diversity of thought really playing a big role in these companies thinking out of the box and bringing real life solutions for their customers. The third step is to be curious. Now, remember that a leader does not have all the answers. They do not have, and it's wrong to expect that a leader will have all the answers for you. A leader is someone who has the ability to ask the right questions to get to the answer. So, when you start asking questions, when you be curious, you are opening a door and being receptive for all different kinds of answers that are coming in. That is going to help you formulate a solution that works best in your situation. I remember an example early on in my leadership days. I took over a new team, and this team had a lot of institutional knowledge. And the team was awesome. As I walked in, I wanted to make sure that the team understood that I would be encouraging new ideas from them. But the way I framed my question was, my statement was, I don't like to see no as an answer, right? I don't accept no's, which basically meant that the team should feel very comfortable bringing in new solutions before saying no to a problem. They should think out of the box. They should, as they're thinking about solutions, they should not think about any constraints. However, what the team interpreted this to be was that I did not like no as an answer, which means that they should basically be saying yes to everything and try executing on it without thinking about what could be a better solution. That was definitely not my intent, but I can see why the team thought the way they thought. So I had to actually reframe my questions. I had to basically think about how my conversation would go with the team so that they know that I'm curious. I want to hear from them, and I want to hear a different point of view, a different diversity of thought. And that is my way of providing them that psychological safety. Since then, I've learned to reframe my questions. And now I use questions like, what are my blind spots? What am I not seeing in this whole piece, the solution piece? What are you not seeing? Right? We don't know what we don't know. That's how I start sometimes my conversation. So help me understand what we don't know. And when I do this, I have realized that it encourages my team to speak fearlessly, to bring in their experiences and to bring in that diversity of thought into the conversations so that together we can come up with a solid solution and innovative ideas that our customers need. So just by being curious and by rephrasing the questions that I now ask them has enabled me to drive inclusion within my team. And it has encouraged my team to bring in that diversity of thought and to be able to think outside the box for innovative solutions. And it has provided them with that psychological safety. Now, the fourth step is to provide feedback. Now, this is a very interesting concept, and many people ask me about this. Does providing psychological safety mean that you're obligating your team from being accountable? And that's definitely not the idea. Providing psychological safety does not mean that you should not hold your team accountable. On the contrary, because solutions are developed with your team, with their ideas based on their unique experiences, you have a team that is much more accountable because you have their buy-in. They're part of the conversation from the very beginning, and they have never felt that fear to voice their concerns if there were any in the beginning. So the key is to provide your team with the timely feedback from your point of view, recognizing that your view may be partial and there is more to the story. Now, that is the key part in this. When you do so, you welcome and invite a conversation which helps build psychological safety because you're now opening up the conversation. A great way to start these kind of feedback conversations is by using the I statements. I have noticed versus you did this. When you frame your sentences with I, you actually take accountability. You acknowledge that it's your perspective and you offer an opportunity to your team to share their perspective as well. Then that feedback becomes a conversation. It's not a difficult conversation anymore because you're just bringing your perspective into the game and the other team members are bringing their perspective as well. So that is important. Hold your team accountable, but provide them feedback in such a manner that it's acceptable, that it becomes a conversation, that it becomes sharing perspectives versus hard feedback that is accusatory sometimes in the way it's presented. Now, last step is to acknowledge risk takers. Taking risks, looking beyond the obvious, being vulnerable, and trying out new things takes a lot of courage. So, what you want to do is part of building that inclusive culture that provides psychological safety is to acknowledge and celebrate risks, immaterial of what the result is. You want people to feel good about just by taking risks. And even if they're not successful, then treat those as learning opportunities. As a leader, do not show your disappointment if the risk that was taken by your team members did not result in a success, because it's not going to be that every risk that your team is going to take is going to result in a success. But if you show your disappointment, then your team starts feeling disappointed and then they don't feel comfortable about taking risks. And taking risks is so important for that growth mindset to think about innovative solutions. So you definitely what you want to do is you want to normalize failures. You want to reframe failures as learning opportunities, and you want to celebrate them so that your team starts feeling comfortable about taking risks. So those were my 5 steps to build psychological safety in a team. Remember that it takes time to build a psychologically safe team. But once you start doing that, once you start building that psychological safety in your team, you start building a diverse and inclusive and a culture of belonging in your team, and your DEI journey then becomes easier.